All right. Well, we are rocking and rolling. Well, this is SANDCAST, everybody. Beach volleyball. There is beach volleyball kind of in the future again with
Yep.
Bourne and Travis Mewhirter. And coming on with us again, not too long ago, we had you on for the first time too, is Miss Falyn Fonoimoana. How we doing,
Hey
Fal?
guys. Doing good, guys. Thank you so much for having me on again.
Yeah, for sure. It's been fun just seeing you at the Valley Park Training Center. I think I've seen you more like since quarantine started than I had like in the last like couple years combined.
I think so too. I think we're on the same schedule, so that's what makes it great. On the beach, it's a little bit bigger, so
Yeah.
it's hard to see people through that whole landscape there.
Yeah. And then like you live literally right across the street, so
And I still don't see you that much,
I
but
know.
enough that when I do, I make sure to honk my horn at you guys
Yeah.
every time I see you.
It's always so funny, like just walking around Hermosa, because Hermosa is just such a small community where everybody pretty much knows everybody, that me and Delaney will be walking and people like will honk at us and we'll just be like, don't know who that is, but it has to be a beach
Yeah.
player.
All
Right.
you gotta do is wave your hand. It's like the rite of passage. Oh, hey, and then just keep going.
I love that. I came to LA and, at downtown at SC, as you know, found, and people
hmm
start honking. I'm like, who was that? And I think they were
Exactly.
just pissed at me or something. I
Yeah.
was, damn, I'm used to island life. You don't really honk at
You
people if
don't honk at people. You
you
don't
like
honk at
yell
people
at
at
them or
all.
something.
Exactly. Exactly. It's exactly what it is.
But that's kind of how it is down here in the South Bay. It's a small little bubble culture, and
hmm
also a volleyball culture. And
Yeah.
you're probably the best person to talk about it because you grew up down here in the South Bay in the volleyball culture with a huge, volleyball in your bloodline. And
Yeah.
I mean, also a topic that we want to talk about today is that you're African American and you come from a culture that is predominantly white in both volleyball and the South Bay. And that's
Yeah.
something we want to talk about today is bringing up just your experiences in general and sharing your experiences growing up within this culture.
No, that's a great point. I was born and raised here, Hermosa Beach, California. I went to Hermosa View K through third, and I went to Hermosa Valley 4 through 8. And then I went to Maricosta High School right after that. And then I still stayed locally to SC. So, I've lived here my entire life. All 28 years I've lived in this bubble. And, the big thing is just kind of talking about, being in this area. I mean, I was very fortunate to be in this area.
Mm-hmm.
This area is something that I will never take for granted. I want to raise my kids here. I want to do all of that. But, the information is huge because we do live in this bubble. There is certain things that happen where, people like me don't just walk around here all the time. I was, I was the tall Black girl that everyone knew.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you were 4 grades up or, 3 grades down, who I was just because I stuck out like that. And, I think a huge part is there was not that many Black kids. I think I was the only Black kid until maybe 3rd grade. And then, after 3rd grade, we had a couple people move in. And then I think towards 6th or 7th grade, we had a few more come. But still, we were maybe under 10, maybe 11. And, with that experience, it's really important for me to kind of just say this. And, I've been so active on social media. And I'm usually not posting this much. I used to hate when people had all of those bars up there because they post forever. And I'm that person now. And it's I'm sure it's annoying for certain people, but for me, if I just get one person a day to just educate themselves on something that I posted, I did my job. And that could be anything and sometimes it's brutal to hear. Sometimes it's, this is what the police is doing and this is why we're upset. Or maybe it's, this is the culture history that has happened for hundreds of years and this is why we're upset. Or there's just so many broad ranges of where I've been posting. And so my experiences, I think there's different levels of oppression, and I'm very lucky that I haven't been oppressed the way we've been seeing in these videos. I'm very blessed in that way, but that doesn't take away where I have been oppressed. And in this area, I'm pretty sure every cop knew who I was when I was walking home, and they always honked. They were always super nice to me. But, now looking back at it, that was their job to make sure they knew who I was. And now, looking at certain situations, I was bullied a ton when I was younger because I was tall and skinny. I was super sweet. And I had to start getting some attitude and some, I guess you could call me a bully after I started getting bullied, because I had to realize that, certain kids would, pick on me and say certain things. I mean, they would say everything like, why is your hair like that? Or, why is your butt so big? Or, certain things like that. And
Mm.
obviously something I had to go through was, realize like, is something wrong with me? Is, why am I different? Or why do they choose me to pick on? And my mom chose to take me to Hawaii to see my cousins who obviously are darker skinned, but that's my Samoan Hawaiian side. So I got to see, okay, like they're like me,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, I had to identify with all of, I'm mixed. So I have a lot of different cultures in me. I'm a mutt basically, I'm Hawaiian, Tahitian, Samoan, black and white. So I have a lot that I identify with, but if you're just looking at me and you don't know who I am, you're going to identify me as black. That's the very first thing that you're going to identify me as. And, I recently I had posted, this was a couple weeks ago, I was in Lazy Acres, and this is when the protests were in full like throttle. And I was going to Lazy Acres, which is a very upper echelon, place, just getting, some good treats there. And this lady had came up to me and, she was like, hi, are you looking for something? I was like, no, I'm just getting some stuff. Oh, are you sure? Do you live here? And I was like, what? And, it wasn't someone who worked there. It was just this random blonde lady who came up to me. And then her next words were, well, the protest doesn't start till 7:30. I said,
No.
well, ma'am, I'm not going to the protest. And do you live here? And then she didn't say anything. And I asked her, like, how long have you lived here? And she said 15 years. I said, ma'am, I've lived here for 28 years. And I just left. And that just goes to show me that just there is so much more work to do in this area. And it's a privilege to be in my situation because I can use my platform, but a lot of people don't have voices. And that's kind of why I wanted to go to you guys. Because, at first I didn't know how much I wanted to put myself out there. But right now I look at my son, and my son is the sweetest kid. He's the cutest kid. He's 7 years old. He has the world in front of him. And it scares me to see the world what it is right now, because my son is going to be bigger than me. My son is going to be 6'7", 6'8", huge. And I don't want him to be seen as a threat, because my son is going to be intelligent. My son is going to have, hopefully he has scholarship offers. He's a very important person, and he's smart, and he uses his intellect. But the last thing I want him to do is not have the benefit of the doubt that, a lot of African Americans, Black men do not have. And that's a huge part for me because I was given that. But I also think it's different for girls than it is for boys.
One thing I'm wondering, Fal, so you mentioned like, you grew up in the South Bay, which is predominantly white, and that, you were kind of just like the tall Black girl in class, right? Well, I'm wondering, because you grew up in it, like that was kind of your normal, right? Did you really notice, and did you really like feel any kind of different because that was just like how you grew up? So I grew up in like pretty much like a predominantly white town.
Yeah.
And then when I first moved here, I worked for a company that was pretty much all Korean. And so we had I helped kids write their college admissions essays. I kind of like helped them just with like the grammar and stuff. And so we had two counselors who were white. And so they would confuse us all the time. They'd come up to me and be like, oh, Counselor Jason. I was like, nah, he's the other white guy. And so I knew, like, I realized then like how abnormal that was, that I was just like one of two white guys because I grew up in a mostly white environment. But I didn't know what it was like growing up for you, as like in a mostly white environment, being a little bit different. Like if you noticed that you were different, if you felt you were treated any different or anything like that.
I think when I was younger, it's just you're a kid, you're innocent, and you're just
Yeah.
playing around with your friends. But I think once my body started to change and I started to sprout up is where I was sticking out, and that's where it started to happen. And that's where I was like, wow, I'm different, and I didn't understand why. It was more of like, do they not like me? Am I not nice enough? Or, I can't make friends. But looking back at it, the things they used to say to me just makes it seem that it's kind of like if you go to a different country, like when I went to Poland and they've never seen a Black person before, it kind of is that situation, because it's like, are you different? Are you the same as me? Are you, like there's so many questions. And I feel like now looking at it, it's a parenting issue, right? It starts at home. The first teachers you have are your parents, and your parents are supposed to expose you to certain things. So when the world comes at you, kind of how to handle it in a certain way, maybe not the whole situation. And I just think that, it wasn't really a major issue, especially because we had such little numbers of Black kids in my school that, that wasn't really something that came up to them. But I definitely noticed, especially, I want to say like 6th, 7th, 8th grade is when I started to like sprout up and my body started to change. That was a huge age where I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and right when I was about to go to high school, I told my mom I didn't want to go to Maricosta. I wanted to go to Bishop, and I wanted to go to Bishop Montgomery because it was diverse. Because I knew that some of my friends that I played volleyball with were going there, and they had Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, they had everybody there. And I was like, oh, I'll fit in perfect. And I thought that it was going to be the same transition to Maricosta if I stayed with all of my friends who went to Hermosa Valley.
Okay. I talked to, so I went on a trip with Earl Schultz to the Cook Islands. And I've seen, so I'm working with Evie Matthews as a coach, and he coaches Chrissy. And so I've been like talking to them a fair amount, and it's weird to me. Like, why do you think that volleyball is so predominantly white? Because it doesn't seem like the barrier to entry is pretty low, right? It's similar to, say, basketball. Like all you need is a ball and a court,
I mean, yes and no. You have two traits. If you go to, let's say predominantly, where is a Black community? It's inner city schools, and it's, it's not something that you're going to have a volleyball net set up.
Yeah.
You're not going to have volleyballs there. You're going to have a field, and you can go buy a ball, like you said, a soccer ball or a football. And then there's going to be basketball courts. And there's not going to be nice gyms everywhere. It's going to be outdoor. That's where pickup games and all that stuff kind of happens. And that's, I think that's where a lot of recruiters don't go out and get these kids at a young age. They have the YMCA, but how close is that YMCA to them? How much time does a single mother have to go, if she has 3-4 kids, to take one of her daughters or two of her daughters to this when she has to be at work? So I think it's I think it's more of a privilege in the sense of white areas, because we have the means, we have these nice gyms around, we have the beach. These are things that are a lot more accessible for us to get to, and I mean us in this area. And I think it's harder even in not being Black, I mean everything from Black to Samoan to Mexican to even the Torrance area. A lot of them don't go out here and play beach or find areas. And I think it's because it's a culture, every sport is a culture. Just like down in Puerto Rico, baseball is the culture. Just like, there's so many different areas that they cling to that. And I think a big thing of, for at least for Black girls, is basketball. Basketball is huge for Black girls. And then for boys, it's football and it's basketball, those two things. Some, scatter themselves into baseball, but that's if they, find a good team, or if they have even a local, what is it called? It could be a Hermosa Beach youth baseball, or, something like that, youth sports in their area. They don't have to go too far for it.
Okay.
Certainly for beach volleyball, predominantly, you have to be wealthy to live by the beach, right? So, this is a wealthy white community near the beach and near almost every beach, to be honest.
Yeah.
So for beach volleyball, it's totally a culture thing. You grow up idolizing people that you see. beach volleyball is not on TV too much. So the only kids who are going to see beach volleyball are the kids that live down by the beach. And so I think that's just it's just a circular thing that just keeps happening. And then you look at basketball players, let's be honest, most of the best basketball players of all time are Black. And these are the guys that all these kids in the inner cities are looking up to. And of course you're going to pick that sport. You're going to pick the sport that you look up to, you have heroes in, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Totally.
Yeah, I feel like an environment, it just plays such a huge role in everything. Because I mean, you mentioned like our culture in a farm town in Maryland. Like if you're a guy playing volleyball, then something went wrong. You picked the wrong sport.
Totally. And then I come from the opposite of that, right? Like Hawaii is one of the only states, and then Southern California and like the beach cities of Southern California specifically are the only places where males playing volleyball is kind of accepted and not weird. And I didn't really know that. In fact, I didn't know a lot of things when I came up to the mainland. There's so many things I didn't know. The only time that I heard about racism and anything like that was in history class. And it seemed like so long ago. It seemed like the same thing as the Holocaust or something crazy, like where I hear it, I see it, but like, did that really happen? Like, you know what I mean? You believe it and it happened, but it seemed like just so long ago that it happened. Like you hear about the gladiator days when they just made slaves fight each other basically. And it's like, that can't be real. But then you come up here and I started to, it was only when I came up to LA that I started to realize my white privilege, because in Hawaii, especially in the town I grew up in, I was the minority. I was the white boy. Right. It was like everything I heard was like, "Hey, Holly boy," you know what I mean?
Exactly.
I came up to the mainland, and I started getting treated a little different. I was like, I feel like it was a weight off my shoulders. Like I'm like, oh, I'm just like normal, like cool, whatever, sports guy. It was different. I didn't have to think like, when I'm like, if a cop pulls me over or something, if it's like a big Samoan guy, I'm gonna be like, sorry, sir. Like, you know what I mean? Like in Hawaii, I'm like, I better shut my mouth right now. Cause like I'm in Kapolei and I just have to know how to act. Yeah. But then I came to the mainland and it switched. Yeah. And that's only when I realized like, wow, something's like, this is still alive and real. And that's my point, is that when you didn't grow up in it, you don't realize that it's still alive. And I think that's what's the biggest thing right now in our culture or in our community at this moment, is that we need to realize that it's still alive. Like this isn't just something in your history books that happened. This is something that continuing to happen. And it can't be just I sent out a social media tweet, I'm good. Like I did something to make yourself feel good about it. I think we need to figure out as a whole how we can continue to keep highlighting this so that change can happen and the equality can finally balance out, which is like, seems like an impossible task because it's been so long, but that's just the reality, is that something needs to be done and we all need to take it upon ourselves, whether we're Black or white, to make a change. But realistically, if you're Black, you're trying to make that change. You've been trying to, your family's been trying to. If you're white, you just didn't really think about it, like I didn't, right? You're like, that doesn't exist in my life, so it kind of doesn't exist. And I think that's what we're here to kind of figure out, and hopefully you can help I guess educate us, and we can all learn together on how to make this world a little better.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Two things you pointed out. I just want to clarify that it's not a Black versus white issue. This is a human race issue. This is something that we want you to realize, that we want all the things that you get to do, we want to be able to do. We want everything in the sense of walking down the street, not having to look over our shoulder, and that feeling you're talking about, not getting pulled over and fearing, I better act right, or something might happen. This is something that we want for us, and we want for our children, and we want for generations. And it starts with just realizing that we're not trying to just put blacks versus whites. We're putting it as everyone. And something I've been having a lot of conversation with is, being a good person is hard. People think being a good person is easy. Oh, I'm going to wake up and be a good person. No, being a good person literally means that you are aware of other people's feelings. You are aware of what other people are going through, and you care to be better for them, and you care for them to be better for you. It's vice versa. It's a two-way street. And that's a huge part of it. And that's what people don't realize is we're just asking you to try to be a good person. And that's the first thing we're asking. Don't be a good person. Try first. Try and see if you can do that for us. And that's something that people don't realize is, right now it seems like we're forcing a lot of stuff on you, which this is the time to force a lot of information. But for me, I want it, just like I told you, I want that one person a day to read my post and be like, wow, Falyn, I had no idea. Or Falyn, I just learned something today. And I've gotten so many of those. And I think the second thing you pointed out, and I wanted to make sure, is history is huge. And I think this is something that I would like to be a part of, is I want to change history books. I want all of the information that I've been learning and I've known of changed, because it seems like, when you're in school, there's chapters, right? We go through the Holocaust, and then we go through slavery, and then we go through, colonialism, like all these different things we go in through chapters. But, I think, just like we have every month is a different appreciation. In that month, we should be learning about everything. And, certain things that I wrote down, which is huge, is, a lot of people don't know what Juneteenth really was, but Juneteenth in 1865 is basically Emancipation Day, Freedom Day of when the slaves were freed. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I knew that till I was an adult. I didn't know what Juneteenth was. And yeah, and that's something that's huge. People had no idea. And it's not something that, people need to know the history of each thing that we're trying to talk about. And that was a huge day. And the fact that I don't know that, and I'm Black until I was an adult, I feel like, Falyn, what are you doing? You don't know your culture. And, another thing is that I learned in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was Black Wall Street. There was a huge, in Tulsa, there was a huge land of area where Blacks ran their whole town. It was everything from banks to bakeries to butcher shops. They basically had, everything was Black owned, and they were thriving. And this was around 1921. And in that time, it was burnt down. It was burnt down by whites, and it was basically just burnt to a crisp. And they had nothing. They don't have insurance at that time. They didn't have anything, so they just had to start completely over. And Black Wall Street to this day now has memorials of what it was and what it used to be. And I think these are things that we need to know in our history. We need to be able to understand that, and a lot of people, I hate to say it, but it's true. They say that we're lazy. They say that, a lot of issues come with that we didn't work for anything. But no, little do we know, the Indians were here first. And once you kick the Indians out, you made the Black slaves build up the country. And they have come from so far of, understanding where we're coming from in the sense of just history. These are things that the kids need to learn. And there's so many more things that could be talked about, but whether we pick and choose which things and, how long that month really lasts, because I know a kid's attention span is so small what they're going to grasp, but picking and choosing is really huge for history and for the future. Because in order to not repeat history, we need to know what happened and what's going on and how to not make the same mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, so like right now, there's just so much stuff going on. I feel like coronavirus and the quarantine, I feel like we were just ready to blow. And then we had the George Floyd case. I'm wondering, how much do you think that Corona aided in it being as big as it became? Because I feel like everyone was just like, we were ready to be ignited, and then just bam, we got it. That was our matchstick.
No, I think obviously being isolated, you have a lot of time to think. And I think it didn't help that we were all stuck at home. And I'm pretty sure, because I watched the video a ton of times in disbelief, and I think that made it even more of an explosion. And I think that was something that made it worse, but it needed to happen. You know, it was kind of like inevitable for it to happen because, you know, I've seen many more videos than George Floyd. I've seen a ton of situations, but nothing really could happen. And I think the uproar just kind of happened because we were at home and
Yeah.
because we have been isolated and locked up, we felt, and it was just kind of like, you know what? Oh, I'm breaking out. You know,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna break out of it. So
Yeah.
it,
I'm wondering, because so when it happened and the video started going out, I feel like there was like universal disgust about it from, you know, either side, left and right on the political spectrum, you know, whatever race, ethnicity, background. I feel like everyone was just like, that cop is an idiot and something needs to be done about it. And then I feel like because it became, I feel like the reactions went far enough where then we started to divide again, instead of, because I feel like that was a great opportunity for everyone to be like, you know what, this was, you know, pretty fucked.
totally.
Like, let's fix this problem. Do you think that, like, you know, because then I feel like the riots then escalated it beyond conversations again, and now we're back to violence. And I was just curious what your perspective on it was, because I was like totally in support of like peaceful protesters, and I was like, what, I just didn't know what was being accomplished by, like, you know, businesses being, you know, having bricks thrown through their windows and fire start. And I was like, damn it, I feel like we missed like a great opportunity.
You know, I think you hit the nail on the head here. That was a perfect opportunity when everyone saw the video and discussed to be like, everyone is on the same page. This is wrong and something needs to be done. But then I started to see, and this is something that it makes my stomach hurt because not only did we go from, okay, this is wrong, but we went to, well, look at his rap sheet. Look at his history. Look what he's not that good of a person. Why is this the camel that broke, you know, the pin that broke the camel's back? And I was looking and I'm just like, no matter what he did in his life, he does not, he does not even just a little bit deserve to die. And that's where we went wrong.
Yeah.
That's where we as a human race went wrong. And that's where, and I believe the blacks went, and this is where the whites, and I also think a couple other, you know, races went with them, because just like you said, we had a perfect opportunity to say, you know what, this is wrong. We should not be okay with this. We, you know, justice to be served. And we went into his past, and then we dug into, you know, well, you know, what else did he do? And well, it was a $20 counterfeit bill. I don't care if it was a $50
Right.
counterfeit bill. I don't care. I care if he did something wrong. Okay, he can go to jail. That's fine. But he would still be breathing today. He would, his daughter would still have a father today. She could still talk to him. She could still have him in her life. Right now, she doesn't have that. Right now, that little girl is going to be able, when she gets older, to look up a video of her father dying. That's my point. And that's where it's not okay. And you're talking about how it escalated. That's how it escalated. That is the strongness you hear in my voice. Imagine being a black man in an inner city or even down here and being handcuffed or manhandled or beaten by a baton and feeling that inside, like, oh my God, I know exactly how that feels. This is not okay. And they're going to keep doing it. It's rage. And while people pick at you, and they always say poking the bear. And this is what another thing that, you know, you cannot, and this is something, you know, people do all the time, but you cannot say, you know, and tell people how to feel and how to react. They're going to do it any way they feel, whether it be death, whether it be, you know, something was robbed of them, anything that happens, how they react is how they're going to. And certain people chose to peaceful protest, certain people chose to loot, certain people chose to burn stuff down. And this is where we're a completely different generation than when Martin Luther King and Malcolm X was here. We had two leaders. We had two leaders that had the same types of identity, the same types of ideas, but two of them went two different ways. Martin Luther King, he wanted peaceful protests, and he had a strategy. He had people sit in buses and sit in capitals and do different things this way. And Malcolm X did the same thing, but you know what? You know what he said? I will not let you be beaten by the police or hosed down. And if they hit you, then you have the authority to hit them right back. And those were two different philosophies and two different men who were leaders. Right now, I don't feel like we have any leaders helping the young generation to say, you know what, come with me. This is my plan. This is what we're going to do. Or this person saying, come here. This is my plan. This is what we're going to do. You have young adults who have been oppressed their entire lives and who are trying to just make it day by day. And they constantly feel beaten. And they chose either to, either loot or peaceful protest. They chose their different ways, or maybe they just chose to break some stuff in their, their house or someone else's house. But, do I promote violence? No, I do not. But do I think I can judge someone else's oppression? I don't. Right. I don't think that I can be that person to say this is right and wrong, but I don't promote violence. That's something I don't promote. But I do see with the things that, even with peaceful protests, this is the difference, and this is what people don't understand, and I saw a lot on social media. There are peaceful protests and there are people looting. There are two different people. People who are peaceful protesting are going out there to change the world. They want change. People who are looting are people who are using the protest to be opportunists. It's two completely different groups. You can't group those peaceful protesters that did not hit anyone, who did not, burn stuff down, who are there with their signs for hours and constantly being arrested for being out there, being peaceful. Those are the people that are being arrested, are protesters. We barely saw any looters, maybe a percentage of looters. I didn't even look at how much the percentage was. I know it's small amounts of looters who were arrested. So what does that show you? That shows you that people who are trying to change are the ones getting beaten and shot with these rubber bullets and being beaten with batons, and people who are just trying to do their job. And even though it's curfew, they are a first line, what is it called? When they are like Uber Eats on their bikes. I saw a video of a man delivering food, and he is basically an essential worker being beaten by police, saying, "What are you doing here?" And he happens to be Black. These are things that have happened where it's both are wrong. Both sides are wrong. And once both sides say, what are we going to do to change, and what are we going to do to be better, and how can we work together, then we can talk. But I think there just needs to be a plan. There needs to be strategy. There needs to be organization. It can't just be loosey-goosey. We want change, rah, 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 and then the other one wants to get mad that my big thing is, I have police officers in my family, and I've talked to them. I hear their side. I support them. And the greatest thing that they could ever tell me is, we support you, but not all of us are like that. And I get it. No, not all police officers are bad. They're not. But I hate to say it, but there's a significant group that are bad and that use their power and abuse it. And we have countless examples now to show that they do this. Now, how do you, as an officer, if you're a good officer, this is something that I ask, if you're a good officer, how are you going to be offended by me feeling a certain way and me voicing myself to you, and me coming from a place of, how do we change this? Most officers do not even entertain the conversation. We see now that officers are resigning. They're not even going to work. I'm sorry, I'm a fighter. If I am a good officer, I am going to stand my ground, and I'm going to say, you know what? You're right, and this did happen, but I have never done this, and I've never done that. How can we change? We can do this, this, and this. We can hold each other accountable. Those are things that we need from that side. And I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening as much that it should be. I see certain people and certain congresswomen and women and men standing up and saying certain things, but that's just not enough. There needs to be more support from the overall.
I was listening. Go ahead, try.
Well, it's just the high emotions is the part I think that it separates people normally, right? But I think, at least from my side, a white male, you have to understand that people are coming at this out of desperation, and they're scared, and it's like your kid. At some point in your life, your kid's gonna be so pissed and outraged. I mean, it's like me. I punched a freaking ref stand and broke my hand and lost a ton of income. You do stupid stuff when you're outraged or you're really mad and whatnot. And I think what we need to understand is you can't get offended by every little thing that people are saying right now. You need to understand, okay, I don't even need to know what you're saying. All that I know is that something's wrong and something needs to change. And I think, you guys mentioned earlier that everyone was outraged, right, from this whole thing that's going down. That's everyone that's in our circle, everyone that we've seen. The real problem is that not everyone's outraged. Like, there are people out there who are fully against this and fully on the side of this police officer. Like, these people exist. That's something I've learned. I just read something yesterday that said someone put a noose in Bubba Watson's
saw that this morning.
Bubba Wallace, the NASCAR driver.
Yeah.
Bubba Wallace, the
the only
NASCAR
black
driver, in his
NASCAR
garage.
driver.
In his garage.
Like, this exists, and this is something that's actually happening. So the problem is that not everyone's outraged. And you mentioned earlier, like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, they had two fully, I guess, polarizing ways about doing things, but they were leaders. However, they both got assassinated, right? By whites.
They sure did. Yeah.
That could totally be contributing. That's probably is contributing to why there is no one stepping up. Why Colin Kaepernick doing just a small gesture, which, really that is a small gesture, and it turned into this huge thing that people got so mad about. But he lost his job, his career, just by doing something small, something small that was a form of leadership, So
exactly.
It's just like people are probably taught that they shouldn't speak up. There shouldn't be a black leader. Obama, he is the one that comes to mind when I hear black leadership, but even he's taking, I don't know enough to speak on it, but I don't think he's taking an aggressive stance in either way. He's not being Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. He's doing his own way, but it just seems like it's such a difficult conversation to have because of this high emotions, and it's so black and white, literally, but also like you have to take a side, right? And you might feel attacked, so then you're going to close yourself off. Whereas right now, I think this is the best time to just don't take offense to anything anyone says. Just have empathy and understand where they're coming from, and then ask yourself, am I going to be part of the solution or the problem? And the biggest thing right now is speaking up, right? If you're not speaking up, silence is violence, right? And that's a tricky subject too, because you feel kind of attacked. You're like, I'm not racist. Like, I know deep down in my core that I'm not racist. So like, how am I a violent one right here? That's something you could easily feel attacked about as a white person, right? Because you're like, no, I'm 100%, 1000% not racist. But the problem is, are you doing something productive or active? I was reading an article. I think the smartest way he talked about it, Joe Thomas, one of the NFL players, he's like, you can either be passive about it or active. And if you think of other situations, I don't have an example exactly, but if you're in a group of 5 people and one guy's doing something wrong and you just stand there, right? Like, you're in a group on an island with 5 people and this guy is, let's just say the worst case, raping someone, and you just stand there. Are you a part of the problem or the solution? You're part of the problem, right? Because you're not doing anything. And I mean, that's an extreme example, but that's kind of how I have to break it down to like a small group of people. Like, I'm a part of the problem in that solution. I need to actually be active to help in any certain way, and also not, I guess, buy into the high emotions, and just be level-headed and understand where people are coming from, all different places. Like, they may have had a relative who's been shot or something, you know, and I'm this white guy that came from Hawaii and has never even barely experienced the Black culture.
Right. No, I think you hit so many great points. First, Obama has been a huge step for when he made a couple statements, and his statement was that protest is the only way things will get done. And you know, this is something that he put history out there, and it took 368 days after Rosa Parks sat in that bus for Blacks to be able to sit anywhere in a bus. It took that long, and there's so many more examples he gave. But basically, you know, I'm very proud of my young Black Americans who are standing up for what's right. And he hasn't really chose a side in the sense of what to do, but he is saying that in order to change, you have to stand up, and it has to be now. The spotlight is on you. You have to be able to stand up and do those things. And I think he did a great job, and I don't think he can do too much more. You know, I think that's where he kind of is the overall voice for us. But it's kind of like when Samuel L. Jackson narrates a movie, that's all he can do is narrate. And that's, you know, how I feel Obama is. But I think another huge thing that you put in there was when you were talking about just, I lost my train of thought. Hold on. You were talking about how
I do it all
the silence. This is something that is huge for me, and I did another post about, is because I consider myself to be very loving. I consider myself to be compassionate. I consider myself to be one of those people that love hard. And you know, I kind of put out there, if I see that you're silent, you know, please take this in consideration. If you care about me, if you've played with me, if you played against me, if we are associates and we are on good terms, if you have one Black friend, if you have a Black kid that you coach, if you teach Black children, there's so many different categories that you could go with this. But you need to be able to sit down and say, this may not affect me, but how is this affecting you? You know, this may not affect me, but how can I help you through this? You know, and I've gotten plenty of text messages from my white friends. Hey, Falyn, I love you. I don't know what to say, but I just want you to know that I'm here. I just want you to know that I support you. I just want you to know that if you have something for me to do, let me know. And the 3 things I gave them: I want you to educate yourself. Educate yourself on history. Educate yourself on what's going on right now. And then second is, once you feel comfortable in the information, start sharing your own personal dialect of what you learned. And then the third thing is, stick up for us in the way that you're comfortable. If you see something that is going on from a friend, a family member, maybe someone you've known forever that maybe be a family friend, say something. Because too many things are happening in the small conversations, whether it be social media, text messages, and no one says anything. And, you know, there's a person that, you know, I talked to a lot, and they said the biggest issue is not Blacks telling whites what to do, it's whites telling other whites what's right and wrong. Because that's where it won't be socially okay for you to say something that is racist, for you to say something that is insensitive. You know, the biggest thing for me, and this is something that I tell my friends all the time, have compassion and have patience. With patience, you got to be patient with us to get through our emotions. I feel like I go through so many emotions a day when I look on social media, because there's so much more stuff that comes out. There's more videos, there's more information, there's more stories that I read. And compassion, because, I always feel that people thrive in love. And it's not being in love, but having the love and support of family and friends. People flourish and are their best selves. They always do. And if we had more people being compassionate towards other people, I feel like we'd be going so much further.
You mentioned, speaking up. I'm wondering, I've been kind of torn on this, like what the best method of doing so is. Cause I think that having conversations like this one, where, we're looking at each other, we're speaking. And even though like we can't actually like be physically there, I think that that's important. Cause I look on social media, I feel like it's impossible to have a conversation because social media is just this, like you say, like I could say, I love pancakes and someone would be like, you are a waffle hater. And I was like,
It's
man, I'm
true.
just talking about how much I love pancakes, man. And like,
Yeah.
it's like so hard to have a conversation on social media. And so that's why, like, I called, Miles, and even that, like, I was like torn over call. I was like, well, if I call him, like, is he only gonna think that like I'm calling him because like I'm white and he's black? And like, and I was like, well, I'll just shoot him a text and I'll just be like, hey dude, like just checking in, saying, hey, like seeing how everything's going. And like, I talked to Chris Austin and Earl too. And I feel like those are like just little conversations. Cause like, I like don't want to even look on social media. Cause it's like, I saw it today. I like got on Twitter for the first time, like 5 days. And the first thing I saw was Jesus Christ, a white supremacist. It's like, I'm out. I'm getting out of here, guys. Like, what's the best way to have these conversations? Because I feel like social media is just off the deep end. Like, you can't even get on there
No.
without getting in swimming with the sharks.
That's a great question, because I really don't know the answer, but I've had some. So that's where I feel like I can say something about it. But I have to let you know, it's not going to be a comfortable conversation. It's not going to be something that's, rainbows and lollipops and we're just, drinking a beer and having fun. It's going to be uncomfortable. And it's always the questions that you're shaky to ask are the questions you need to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure here, just like before we started this, is there anything you don't want to talk about? Is there anything you are weary of? And that's where I was telling you, it has to be organic.
Yeah.
And we have to see that it comes from within. It can't be something superficial of just like, oh, I'll ask 1 or 2 questions, but not really go too deep because I don't want to get them mad. And I'm going to be completely honest, and I've told everyone that has asked me, if you guys are really good friends or if you guys have a respect for each other, we're going to respect more that you came to us and ask these questions than we are for us to see nothing, silence, nothing. We see that you're trying to learn. We see that you aren't sure, but you just want to test the waters. That's a big thing, is to be able to be open up and tell yourself, okay, I'm going to ask you this question. And some people do this. I'm going to ask you this question, and I mean no disrespect by it, but I just want to know. And what does that tell me right there? You care. You care because you don't know who to ask or where to go or how to get this information. And you trust me enough to see my opinion. And hey, maybe have a glass of wine, maybe have a beer, loosen up a little bit, seriously. And, just kind of let it go. And as they talk, maybe you're like, I don't really know what Juneteenth is. I don't really know what happened in Oklahoma on this day, or what are they talking about here? And there's a lot of, and this is something that you're talking about in social media, obviously being, I don't want to say the only Black, but in the main draw, I'm basically one in a few in the main draw that is playing. And I've had plenty of fans or just people ask me, how do you feel that, your old partner or your partner now isn't saying anything? And for me, I had to check them and tell them, like, first of all, I think that it's wrong that you're trying to instigate something. And that's what it is. It's kind of like, well, she didn't say anything, so is something wrong there? And what I had to let them know is, every single person, and has checked on me. Every single person has asked for information. And I had to realize that posting isn't everything. Posting is not everything. what are you trying to do as a human to be better? That's all I care about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and whether that be asking me questions, whether that be maybe, you know, clicking on a post that I did and researching it and asking me questions for that, or just telling me like, wow, I had no idea it was this bad, or maybe just sending me heart saying like, wow, you know, I'm really sorry. And what we don't want is sorry. And that's what I had to tell a lot of my friends. We don't want sorry. You know, sorry was for our ancestors and for people before us and things that go on every day. We just want a, like I said, compassionate person to say, how do we change this?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that takes, like we were talking about, a group of people to stand up and do that.
I feel
I
like
think it's a really tough subject. And I think the biggest thing is people listening to each other and having these conversations without judgment for the person that's speaking across from you, because I think everyone, if you come into it with a closed-minded approach, it's not a productive conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're doing on a macro scale. Like as a country, we're all have our own opinions, but we're not necessarily sitting here and just listening to others without judgment. We're all kind of throwing in our own opinions. And that's where I get confused on this whole, you know, you have to speak up, because I actually sat down to write a post. I've tried to kind of draft something up, and it didn't feel like I was educated enough. And I, you know, kept reading more articles like the Players Tribune, I think for me has been the best place to read, because it's just raw athletes. I, you know, relate with athletes, and it's just their perspectives. And it's unfiltered through the news, which is impossible to know what the news is biased are. But for me, I think listening and educating yourself, which is something you said earlier, is almost like, is it more important to do that first before you start speaking? Because some people are starting to speak too early, and you're just not speaking from experience. And every day there's something new to learn out here. But at the same time, I've felt a little bit of guilt for not posting anything quick. Like I was out camping. I literally, the night the riot started, I left and I was off the grid for 3-4 days, and I came back and I was like, what is going on here? And then, you know, I've been trying to collect my thoughts, and I just didn't feel like what I was writing was coming from enough, you know, education, I guess, on it. And as I've read more, I feel like I've been much more enlightened, watching documentaries, 13, having conversations with Travis and Delaney, and just learning everyone's different perspectives on it has been really productive for me. And then, you know, I for sure agree that you have to speak up. You have to express your opinion to those who you have an influence over. Even if that's one person, that's a person you can influence to help this problem in the future or to make it worse. And if you believe that it needs to be better, which seems like everyone should, but it's crazy that everyone doesn't believe that, you know, you just have to do it. You have to speak up. But for me, it's been kind of tricky, learning the difference between speaking up now and taking the time to learn and educate myself before I speak up. Sorry, this is a long
No, you're fine.
I have trouble coming across sometimes.
No, you're fine. You know, I think that I respect you so much more for doing the work before you said something, because it means that you care. You know, these are things that we're talking, you care to want to know more information because it didn't feel right. And you're doing so much more than a lot of people I see, a lot of people. And, you know, this is something that it's raw, but I have to say it. Words are only so much. Words on a paper, words on social media only mean so much. And what you did means that you're not doing just the words, you're trying to have more actions and power with your words. And that's the huge part, is action needs to happen. You know, plenty of these companies are saying words, And they're saying words because it's a trendy thing right now, and they don't want to be, oh, we're not a racist, but we're going to put something out there, and oh, we'll donate some money just so you know we're not like that. But is donating money really doing something about it? Yes, it's going to a foundation, but what is that foundation going to do to make it? But there's so many more steps, and I respect you so much more that you say, I wanted to be informed. I wanted to make sure that I had enough information to speak on it. And another thing is, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah.
It's a marathon. This is going to take years. It's been hundreds of years that this has escalated into this. First, we'd had Rodney King, and now we're here 28 years later. So we have to be more patient is the word, but we also have to be more willing to do what you're doing and start at a base. There has to be steps. We can't just go full board into, this is what we are going to do, because then people are going to feel forced, and it's not going to be on other people's terms. That's the thing. We can't force people to do stuff, but what we can do is ask you to take steps to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think try it along with what you said. I feel like the most important words that people can say right now are, I don't know enough to weigh in on that topic. And then you can learn about it. Falyn, and what you were saying about, words aren't enough. I feel like a lot of people have sort of swayed in the direction that like conversation and those words aren't enough, but I feel like conversation and having, like, I feel like that is action in itself, because then that's how you can change one small perspective at a time. Like you said on social media, if you get just one person, like, that's your win. And I think when you go out and actually have a conversation with someone who's a little bit different and who thinks a little bit different than you, with them in person or FaceTime, I think that social media, I wouldn't label that as conversation, but like actually talking to someone, that's taking action, because then like you can really have like a good dialogue and a good back and forth, and you're not just screaming at each other from one pole to the next. And that develops that compassion that you were talking about, which I think is a perfect word choice. I don't see that one thrown out enough. I see a lot of people like, oh, you can't, I want you to empathize with me, but I think compassion is the word, because we can't all empathize with each other. Like Try doesn't, he can't empathize with what it's like to be from a farm town, and I don't expect him to. But you could have compassion. Be like, okay, well, this is how you were raised, and I get that. And I feel like that's so much what we're missing as a society, but particularly between, cops and the environment that they're policing. And I'm with you. Like, I had a ton of friends who were cops growing up. I got a neighbor right down the street. Actually, two of my neighbors on my block were both cops, and so I've only had pretty pleasant experiences, even when they were called on us in college quite a few times. But I was listening to a podcast with Jocko Willink, who's a Navy SEAL, and he was like, cops should be going into the place that they're policing, and they should be offering ride-alongs and like having kids like in the car and be like, hey, like, this is what we're doing. Like, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. Like, help us understand like the neighborhood, and like you should be getting out there and like showing face. And it's like almost counterinsurgency, like how they deal, in wartime. You go into Iraq, and not all Iraq, 99.5% of people in Iraq are good, and you help those 99.5% identify the bad. And I feel like we're just missing so much of that like we got, 0.5% assholes out there who are ruining it for everyone, because we can't develop that compassion.
No, again, you guys have hit another point that I saw a video, and these videos always get to me. It was a little girl. She was playing at the park with her mom, and a police car stopped. And this is obviously in the midst of everything that's going on. And the police officer comes out, and the girl just bursts into tears because she's terrified. She had seen the video. She sees what's going on. And the officer had come up and basically just wanted to let her know, I'm good. I'm here to protect you. And, I am not one of the bad guys. I'm here. I took this job to make a difference. And I hate to say it, but a lot of cops don't have those types of relationships or memories, or, take the time to do stuff like that. So when you do see a police, what is the first thing that happens? Instant fear, instant anxiety, instant those feelings. And obviously, with respect, They're supposed to be an authority. Yes, I get that, but there is no way that this many people should feel this way towards police if they were doing a good job or doing their job, period. There wouldn't be that conversation of, there's so many bad cops, there's so, pitting people back and forth, when if they went into these neighborhoods and had compassion. I've seen so many great throughout the years, there's cops, playing football with kids
I
in
love
parks.
those.
And there's things like that do happen. I know it's there, but there's not enough of that, and there's more of the abuse of power, and there's no balance. There isn't. And do we have a answer of how that's going to happen? No. But do we have an overall respect that the abuse of power needs to stop? The conversation that I see all the time, and this is something that needs to stop, is we are with Blue Lives Matter. No, and this goes into another thing of Black Lives Matter, and then they put Blue Lives Matter, and then All Lives Matter. These are things that are talked about all the time. Now, I'm going to go into Blue Lives Matter. This goes into, obviously, cops versus blacks. Yes, this is a huge issue. Then we're going to All Lives Matter. Then, Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. Well, if all lives matter, we would never have this issue of Black Lives Matter. We wouldn't have to remind you that our life matters. This would never be a conversation. What people don't realize is, it's just like you said, I love pancakes. Well, you're a waffle hater. Why does it have to be one or the other?
I know.
Why do you have to put, if we didn't feel oppressed, why would we put out, oh, my life matters, you don't care? It's not just an emotional. We have countless evidence here showing you we need support. This is something, and this is not enough people realize. We have done the peaceful. We talked about Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick, I feel, did a great job on trying to be peaceful on this issue. He first started with sitting down on the bench, and then the whole flag issue came up. So what did he do? He had I forgot what part of the military he was, but he had a conversation with someone from the military. And he asked, what would be a respectful way to protest during this time for me to make a difference? And he said to kneel. That's where the kneeling started. That's where the kneeling happened. And he chose to kneel out of respect for the flag, but still have his peaceful protest to show all of these issues that he wanted to talk about. And it blew up in his face. And what people don't realize is he lost his identity by choosing this route. He chose another identity of being an advocate for his race. He had probably played football. Imagine how much we played volleyball. He had played football since he was a little grom, and going all the way up here into the peak of the NFL and choosing to lose it all because of this cause. This cause has to be pretty important for him to do that. Pretty important. And to this day, this man cannot get a job. It had nothing to do with attitude. He didn't get arrested. He wasn't a menace to society. This was one man that chose to stand up for what is right and can't even get back into the NFL because he chose this route. And that was peaceful. And that is a huge issue that we're now going to, well, why is everyone, we just talked about it, why is everyone being so aggressive and looting and burning stuff down? Well, what do you want us to do? We chose the peaceful route. We chose to be respectful to the flag, but still do this. And we chose to protest, and we're still getting shot by rubber bullets. But this goes into the police as well. It goes into so many different issues of, there is never a right for this. It goes, there's never a right way for people. Well, the right way seems to be out the window now, and people are choosing which way they're going to go now.
I think you definitely made a good point that there's no right way to really take any action that is of any importance. Mark Cuban the other day, I think he was like, no matter what the issue is, when you take a stance, you're going to get shit for it. It's not the right way to half the people. And that's just, it takes some stones to make a stand on whatever issue it may be. If it's anything in the social sphere of taking a stand, like there's no winning. And, it doesn't matter. Like, MLK got assassinated. Rosa Parks got a bunch of shit for just sitting down, and Kaepernick with his kneel. So I still feel like, the peaceful way, like Rosa Parks is still talked about today, and MLK he has his own day. And Kaepernick, I think that his legacy of social movement is a far better legacy than a football player anyway. And I don't think he would have that same legacy if he did choose violence. So I'm still in favor that the peaceful, the sort of the loud but peaceful ways of doing things make the biggest impact in the long run. And I'm just trying to think of, like, on our scale. So obviously we're not going to make any policy changes on SANDCAST. So
No, totally. I get it.
But I was just saying, on a micro scale, like, what do you think are the best actions that people could take?
So I'm going to be devil's advocate right now before I answer that question. So when violence was happening, was the protest and everything on the news?
I don't watch the news.
Okay.
So
well, that's my point is, when violence was happening, this was something that was always on the news, whether it be newspaper, online, TV, all that. It was everywhere. It was breaking news that things were happening.
Yeah.
Now, there's protests every single day, Travis. Do you think we see that on the news every day?
I'd imagine not.
No, not at all. And it's unfortunate that it has to be like that. It's unfortunate that people who are trying to do the right thing are not even given the platform. And you said it, the news is biased. The news is biased because they work with the government, they work with these people, and they have to do things every single day with them. And I'll give another example. I was watching the news. Obviously, there was another protest, and this police car had come in, and it was a swarm of people. I want to say over 1,000. And this police car had hit this woman. I believe she was white, by the way. He had hit this woman. She was in a group of protesters. And all you hear on the news is, oh my goodness, the police car is trying to get out of the way of the protesters. Oh, now they're getting signs thrown at them. Not one word of this woman getting run over. So for me, it's like a hot, cold feeling. It's like, well, this woman is just trying to protest with all of these other people, and the news isn't giving them the true identity of what's really happening. And there's plenty of other examples I could give you. That's just one. But these are things that happen every single day. So if there was violence like there was with Rodney King, every single day we would see it on TV. This has to happen. People would have urgency. But because people aren't looting and burning stuff, that it's not that important. That's where it's like, you have this scale of how do you feel? And that goes with the plan of the next question you were saying. How do we go from here? Well, first, I don't feel qualified enough to be that person. I don't feel qualified enough to be that, and this is something that, I know that I'm going to do. My significant other and I are going to start a nonprofit. We are going to help children and help young adults. And we haven't figured out all the way because there's so many ways of how to do it. But we want to make an impact as a family, because there is so many, and I hate to put it out there too, there's so many foundations that aren't putting all of the money or a significant amount into the right things. A lot of these foundations, and I've done my research, are putting a lot of that money towards salaries of other people in that foundation, instead of going into inner city schools and to going into after school programs. And just as easy as it was to pay this woman $1 million, we could go to an inner city school or an inner city park and redo the whole thing. Or we could, there's so many different avenues of being able to do that, and I don't see it happening. Millions of dollars being donated by these big corporations, but where is that money really going? And that's where I have challenged a lot of my friends to post, keep these companies accountable and make them show you what they're going to do. Have a plan. Don't just say you're going to put all of this money in this, okay, we're done, we're washing our hands clean. Create opportunity in business, create opportunities as in scholarships, create opportunities as in internships. These are things that are huge. It changes a person's life with opportunity. You give a person opportunity, they're going to choose the right way. And that is a huge part of where I want to start is, my sponsors are amazing. They've had conversations with me, and we have talked about starting a scholarship fund. We have talked about, donating, but also within donating, learning more history and they would be able to post more, being able to do giveaways of, in those inner city schools, or being able to have I forgot what they called it, but a day that they go into the school and they just donate t-shirts and water bottles and, stuff like that makes more of a difference than money. And I hate to say it, materialistic things that could change someone's life. People don't get how much a meal is super important in the inner cities. People don't get how much backpacks and supplies. I never understood how much being able to go into a school who don't have their own pencils, their own pens, their own crayons, being able to have construction paper, art, all of these things are super important, but we need more people to step up and say, I will do this part of change. I will do this part and change. And it needs to happen now. What I would like, and, I was a part of, my uncle had, Dig for Kids for years. And in Dig for Kids, he used to go into Carson. And in Carson, he used to do where you did your homework for, I think it was like an hour and a half, you had a snack, and then you went and played volleyball. That's huge. But he only got to hit one city. What if we could hit, 10 cities, and whether it be every month or whether it be every 2 weeks, however that happens, but imagine how many of those kids are impacted. More kids need to have good examples, being able to have more, they need to be able to open their minds to what the whole world is. Because when you live in the streets, you're limited to what is in front of you, your resources. Grocery stores are different. They don't even have libraries in half of the areas that I've researched in Los Angeles, in the valleys, in, maybe it just be over in the counties of San Bernardino, Riverside. They don't have those kinds of things. These are things that I don't remember the last time I did not go to a library in elementary. We had Young at Art every month. We had to make something. We had field trips. These are things that are a privilege. These are things that are a luxury. And these things don't happen in these areas. So this is what I want to do. My plan. Sorry, I got on a tangent, I know. But I want to start a nonprofit with, my significant other and I are going to do that and be able to impact children and young adults and be able to, however we choose, because there's so many ways we can, or maybe we can do multiple ways. There's a lot of logistics with that. We're trying to learn, but being able to impact that way. And I also want to be able to do more clinics for volleyball. I'd like to be able to go into those inner city schools and offer my time and be able to donate things. Those are a huge thing for me that I would like to do. And I would also like to challenge a lot of my AVP friends and competitors to go outside the bubble and do it. Because, even if you think, oh, me, little old me, the fact that you are a professional athlete, you hear professional athlete, they're going to open their eyes so big and be like, oh my gosh, they're here for us. And you're going to give them so much more confidence. You're going to give them so much more to look towards. And that's something that I feel like our little volleyball community can do so much more.
Yeah, basically what you're mentioning is that it's easy to donate money. Well, you know, the saying time is money. That's where the real value lies. It's way harder for me to say, I'm going to donate half my day than to just Venmo some money, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of, if you want to think about a sacrifice that you can make is donate your time to educating other people or helping other people, whatever it may be. That's where the value lies, I think, even if it's just sharing your perspective with someone else that respects you, who respects your perspective. Or, I mean, sharing in general, I think people are scared to share their opinion because they're scared of the backlash. But from my experience, you become more comfortable sharing your perspective if you're more comfortable with yourself and you're willing to just be authentic and not care what other people think, because you're just being your authentic self. Doesn't mean you can't change and be a different person tomorrow, but you're being honest, sharing your opinion, and giving some of your time, some of your life to sharing and helping others.
I think, try a good way of thinking about it is it's when you have a kid and you buy your kid a toy, but you don't play with your kid. You just let that kid play with that toy. Your kid would 10 times more like to play with a cardboard box or a ball on the ground or a cube of ice with you than to be alone. And that's something that's huge. They want your time, they want your presence, and they want to just feel important. And I think that's a huge thing that people don't realize. And I hate to say it, but I know how much we don't have time. I know it, because we talked about it in my last interview. We wake up, we eat, we stretch, we, take care of our kids, make sure they have food. And then we're off to practice, and then we come home, and then we're taking a shower, eating something, then we're probably got to go lift, and then we got to recover. And I get it. But, especially in this quarantine, I realized you got to make time.
Mm-hmm.
You got to choose, whether it be half a day. It doesn't even have to be half a day, try. It could be 2 hours. It could be 2 hours of the day that you choose to do that. And those 2 hours was the best of the week, the best of the month. You could have made their life. And it's that 1 or 2 children that you impacted.
Yep.
Well, when you get around to starting that nonprofit, consider your boys on board. We'll help any way we can.
That.
For sure.
I love that. I love that you're actually taking like physical action, because I'm with you in that I've always been just so suspect of just donating money to random like organizations and whatnot, which is why with the Zahn Scholarship, for example, we just started it because people are like, oh, let's just donate money to mental health. And I was like, I'm sure that some of them are good causes, but I think we can just do so much more if we just give it to direct people and we like can see the impact that way. So I'm a huge fan of what you're doing, instead of just like, passing the buck on to some organization where you have no idea, where your money's going or what it's going to do. You're actually going to make that impact yourself, which I think in turn will then make you more motivated to do an even better job. When you see like one kid smile, like the first kid smile that you help out, you're like, hell yeah, let's get a couple more on board. And it's, I think it's awesome that you're taking that step.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I think, if you remember the ice bucket challenge, remember everyone was doing it. It was trendy.
Yeah.
And it was for months. People donated millions of dollars. And if you see really how much money it went to the research, it was astounding how much it didn't. It went to, I think the president, the CEO, CFO made over $10 million. And the year before they had made 500,000. And it's sickening to think that people could take advantage like that. But then you remember, oh, there are people like that in this world who take advantage of those things. But, just like you said, how can we directly impact? And that's a huge thing. And that's just going back to our, initial thing of directly having conversations, directly wanting change, and directly having the ability to say, I don't know enough, but how can I know enough to be comfortable? And what am I comfortable with talking about? And, maybe what am I comfortable with telling my friend that's not okay to say? You know, those are things that, you know, start with, you know, everything's great when, you know, it's a good conversation, but when it's not having a good conversation, how am I going to be better?
And I know another way, direct way you can make an impact that I know you wanted to bring up as well is getting out and voting.
Yeah,
I know that's a message you
huge,
wanted to expound upon.
huge. I mean, voting is something that, as an adult, you pick and choose what you want to read, and you pick and choose what politicians you're okay and you're not okay with. And you know, I was raised in a house of, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics. But you know, now being so huge that you don't really know how much voting impacts. And you know, writing down some of the things that I saw is, you know, you have to start with your local government, because that's where you live, that's where you breathe, that's where your children are, that's where, you know, you embrace. And what the first start is the mayor. The mayor starts with, you know, local government, and it appoints the chief of police. And that's a huge part of, you know, if you have a mayor that you feel wholeheartedly that you've done your research and you know their grasp of philosophy, they're going to choose a person that is going to have somewhat that same grasp of police a chief. You know, and then going from there, it goes into a sheriff. A sheriff is voted on. You vote in a sheriff to make sure, you know, not only the chief of police, but that sheriff is obviously a morale person and going with the area that you are in. The next step goes into the DA. The DA is the top law enforcement. This is the person that they decide when an arrest leads to a charge, and they can either be elected or appointed. And that's huge. That changes everything. And obviously, I'm going to go into a little small thing. Our LA DA is being judged and persecuted, and you know, by a lot of people because she hasn't chose her domain of Los Angeles. Of she is a older Black lady. She has not persecuted half or even nearly enough police officers that have done these abusive type of situations. And if you were to vote or appoint this person, that wouldn't even be a conversation that we'd be having right now about her. Another thing that you goes into the state, in your state legislator is responsible for policies, and in that is like procedures for responding to crime, sentencing structures, and funding to government agencies. That's a huge one, because right now in the state of California, we're talking about, or I want to say everywhere in the United States, but especially here, I've been active of what it means when they're saying defund the police. And it's not meaning defund the whole police and just get them out of here. It's to stretch the budget that you're giving the police all of this money, give back to your community, and make sure that your education and, you know, everything that's going into that is getting the equal opportunity that the police are getting. Into that, it's senators and Congress. Obviously, they create federal laws and reform the criminal justice system. This is another huge part, you know, obviously into what we're going through right now, what is in the federal laws, and obviously criminal justice system being very, very high in the Black community, being arrested and being in jails. And then obviously the president who appoints attorney general. So all of these things, a lot of people, I didn't know this the very first time I voted for Obama. There were so many steps to voting, and there's so many things that you have to get as an information to do this. But I guarantee, you know, my family, my whole household will be voting, other than my son who is 7, will be voting, you know, and we want to be fully informed of all of the information and want to make sure that, you know, whoever we choose to appoint in all of these categories are someone that wants the same that we do, or somewhat similar, because you're not going to get someone who wants exactly the same, but similar values as you. So voting is huge. And I think the huge thing that I'm going to also use as my platform is, you know, not only who I want in office, but also just the different categories of, you know, what is important and what isn't. And also for different areas, it's super important. Like Hermosa Beach, local government, we're not going to do as much of funding towards police as we're going to do probably for the beaches or this or that. But, you know, going into other areas, what is important for Los Angeles, East LA, all that kind of area, all those areas that need a little bit more assistance.
I didn't know like 90% of what you just said, so I appreciate that. I didn't know like the mayor appointed the chief of police, and all I knew is that, you vote for your president and all that stuff. So I appreciate that.
No, I had to do my research. I had to, because my very first voting, I was 18 going for Obama. Majority of what you're voting when you're 18 is your parents. Your parents are telling
Right.
you, who the person is and what the morals are and what's right and wrong. I think my mom actually did my sample ballot for me. She didn't explain anything. She just said, here, this is what you do. And then I think the next time that I voted, I think it was harder for me because you actually learned how much politicians are either in for themselves or have an alternative motive. And that was hard for me to notice. But now being 28 and actually voting, I want to be as much informed. I don't want to be say fully, because I don't think I'll fully be informed of everything. But as much as I can to educate myself in the areas that I feel that are important, and to know that I have a say in all of these different categories is huge.
I remember the first time that because my dad kind of did the same thing. We went through the sample ballot, and he was like, here's, what I'm going to do. And the first time I was like, all right, Dad, you got it. You're the man. And then the next time I voted, I think maybe I was 23. I voted to have casinos in Maryland. And I was like, I'm going against Dad. Look at me go. But making that
That's
jump,
funny.
like learning how to vote for yourself, it's a different feeling.
Yeah, definitely it is. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, I know you have a son to take care of over there, and it's getting a little bit
I
late.
do.
I don't want to keep you
Yes.
for too much longer, but I did want to make sure that we covered everything that you wanted to cover. If there's anything we might have missed, happy to stick around for a little longer, but didn't want to keep you here all night.
I think I really appreciate that. I think there's just, I think one other thing I wanted to put in there, and I think I talked about the justice system and also sentencing structure, stuff like that. I think a huge part is a lot of people have not educated themselves on what it is for the sentencing structures, but I've posted a lot on my thing. I know you haven't been on social media, but a lot of the unjust in our social and our judicial system is sentencing structures. A lot of Blacks have been put into incarcerations for, maybe they stole a backpack, maybe they stole a water bottle, a soda, and they're sentenced to years, while a white person does that and they get probation for a year. And these are the types of issues that I want to bring up, and I want people to educate themselves, because wrong is wrong. They stole something, they did this, but it doesn't mean that their life should be thrown away and not given an opportunity like other races have. Another thing that really hits home for me, because I'm a mother, is Black women birth deaths are 37 deaths to 100,000 compared to white women are 14. White women 14 out of 100,000, and Hispanic women are 11 out of 100,000. And obviously this is a huge issue because it's an institutional racism in society, in the healthcare system. And this is another thing I want people to look into, especially being a mother. This is something that I want to be better for the opportunity, because being able to create life is something that is already a gift, but being able to be scared that your life will be taken away from giving life is something that I want to change. I want it to change. Obviously it won't be immediately, but this is something that I want the healthcare systems to change in this sense, because there should never be a fear of having a baby and not being able to see your baby grow up.
And most of that comes from because majority of these white folks have more money to have better doctors and better hospitals and whatnot, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Wow. Crazy.
Yes. And this is just something I don't expect it to be an answer, but what I do expect is it to be brought up and also being even more publicized, because obviously if it's more publicized, more people talk about it, squeaky wheel gets the grease. So many hospitals are shut down in Los Angeles areas, or just given the bare minimum, and watch it be that one medicine that wasn't given to that hospital that could have saved a life, or, you know, whatever it is. There's so many different scenarios I could, you know, talk about COVID-19. A lot of COVID-19 areas here have had higher cases because they either don't have health insurance or just can't afford to go into the hospital and be quarantined or get the nebulizer or get any kind of treatment that really takes for you to succeed and live. So many people who have recovered from COVID-19 are majority white. And this is another thing that if we can change these, it's seems like something small, but something so big, because living life and being able, I'm lucky enough that I can afford health insurance, but certain people can't do that. Certain people can't take care or pay for their insurance and their children. And being able, you know, breaking an arm for us, okay, let's go to urgent care. Let's make sure they can go, you know, do this. And some families can't do that. Sometimes they have to be, you know, all right, let's put this in a splint and, you know, don't move. And you never know what's really going on. These are things that I want to change for our children, for the future, for the betterment of everyone. And this is where I was telling you, I want it to be a human race type of issue. I want everyone to understand that fighting for everyone's rights, and something that you think doesn't happen, it is happening. And if you just educate yourself in something so small that you are every day, it's going to make a huge impact.
I think Sam Harris, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he said, he put it in a way that I really liked. He was like, society should get to a point where, you know, we view each other like kind of how, like, you know, we all have different hair colors, you know, how like, you know, I could look at Try, you know, and be like, you know, Try's redhead, but it doesn't change how I view him. He's like, could you imagine if like our society was like, oh, Try's a redhead, he's super dangerous. And it like sounds so ridiculous. But that's like kind of what happens a little bit. And he was like, that's where society should try to go to. We're like, sure, we can notice that, you know, like Falyn, you have darker hair and I have blonde hair and Try's got red hair. And that's it. That's the only difference, just different hair color. But like, we're all still, like you mentioned, kind of the same human race. I thought that was a cool sentiment. I'd never heard it expressed that way.
Yeah. And this, like I was telling you before, you know, being a good person is hard. Being able to care about people is hard. You know, even when having children, all your children are different. You're going to have to learn their personalities. They're all going to look different. They're all going to have all different types of traits, but you have to be able to take the time to learn their personality, to understand their niches, understand what they love, and be able to care for them in different ways, because your oldest to your middle to your youngest is going to be completely different and going to need completely different things. But if you take the time to love them unconditionally, and that's something that obviously we don't do as much as friends, but I love hard. I love all my people super hard, and I make sure they know that. I make sure, my son tells me all the time, you tell me you love me so much, you just told me that. And that's something that I want to instill in everyone that is around me, is, you know, just like I told you, people flourish when you love them, when you support them, when you will fight for them. And that's something that I want to make sure, you know, everyone notices. In your own way, fight for that person, fight for, you know, maybe it's just fighting for them in something small because they're talking about that person, and say, you know what, no, you're wrong. I'm standing up for them because this is what's right, and I know that person, you know, not because, you know, you look cool. And sometimes this is something that people need to realize. It's okay to look dumb. It is okay. If people are around you, if there's 5 people in a room that are saying something wrong, and I'm the only person that is standing up for what is right, and I look dumb, it's okay, because I know who I am, and I know what I represent, and I know what I teach is something that I teach my son, and I'm going to make sure that he understands.
You're more mom in politics.
That's
what I came away with. I was like, oh, it probably worked.
I appreciate that.
We appreciate you coming on and taking so much time, Fal. I know you've got some busy days, especially celebrating Father's Day yesterday. So hope you guys had a great weekend.
Thank you. T, you want to come say hi? I have someone that wanted to say hi to you earlier.
Oh, yeah?
Come say hi. Say hi.
What's happening, Tavoy?
There
We
he
can't
is.
hear you. Hold on.
Go ahead.
We've been talking about you a lot
Can you hear
on
him
this
now?
show.
Here.
You're famous.
Can you hear him now? See if you can you hear us now?
There we go.
You
Now
hear
we're,
him?
rock, now we're rocking and rolling.
Now you're famous.
Tavoy, it's nice to finally meet you. We've heard a lot about you.
Nice to meet you too.
Good to have you on the show, bud.
No, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time, for little old me and talking about, these issues. This is why I do it. I do it for the one sitting next to me right now. It's because I want change and I want him to understand that, when he looks back and goes to school and they say, what happened in 2020? He can say, my family fought for my rights and, they wanted me to have a better future. And I'm going to do the same for my cousins, my uncles, my children, and even my friends. That's something that's huge. I want him to always know that he's a fighter and that we're going to fight for what's right.
We appreciate you coming on and having a real conversation, looking at each other and talking.
Exactly.
How about that?
Exactly. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys soon.
Hope to see you. I'm sure I'll see you at the Valley Park Training Center this week.
Yes, we'll see you there. I also, I just announced today I won't be playing this year at 2020 AVP. I'm actually going to be sitting this round out, but I hope you guys go out there and kick some butt. And due to COVID, I have to make sure I put my family first. And we're gonna sit this one out, but I'm gonna cheer my butt off and make sure everyone has that fire. I might can some fire for some of you if you guys get a little tired, so you guys can have it.
Well, I hope that you guys are staying healthy. Tavoy, great to meet you, brother. And all right, guys, we'll have a great rest of the night, and everybody shoots.
Shoots. Good night.
Good night.
You guys.